If you've ever blamed immigrants for any of your problems, congratulations on falling for the oldest trick in the American capitalism playbook. First, it was Chinese immigrants are stealing your jobs, then Irish and Italian, then the Jews and Japanese people. And by the 1940s, when there were no new immigrants left to blame, it became black workers are stealing your jobs. All throughout American history, the government has fed us propaganda blaming one marginalized group at a time for problems they created. Then they hoard wealth and power and shove people into poverty and strip away resources. Then they make sure we're looking at our neighbors and communities to blame instead of the system. And it works, because we still fight each other. Few places show this pattern clearer than Detroit in the years leading up to the riots of 1943. After colonization, Detroit became an industrial city, and that made sense. It was connected to a bunch of waterways, it led into the Great Lakes, and had some of the first railroads in the country. But once the railroads were done, they didn't need to exploit Chinese immigrants for labor anymore. And when the big corporations that hoarded all the wealth left the people starving, well, they convinced the people to blame those very Asian immigrants and passed the Chinese Exclusion Act of 1882. Over the course of a couple decades, Detroit's population boomed up. This trend continued on until the 1930s with the Great Depression, when their population now was at 1.5 million people. And they're all crammed together, fighting for jobs that didn't even exist, and they could no longer blame Asian immigrants. So who did they point to this time? Well, okay, so during World War I, demand for wartime factory production went sky high, and companies now relied on exploiting the Eastern European immigrants. But the U.S. kept passing these new, increasingly racist immigration laws, and they couldn't exploit them either. So this is when companies turned to black Southerners. Even though slavery had legally been abolished, black Americans in the South were still trapped in poverty, segregation, and all that Jim Crow terror, and now these northern factories began preying on them by actively recruiting them. And they moved north in these huge masses. The numbers were so large that it had been named the Great Migration, because between 1910 and 1970, about 6 million black people left the South. So that leads us back to when World War I ended. Detroit's black population had jumped to about 5%, and that was when the Great Depression was starting to hit really hard. But this wartime production had to come to an end at some point, and now there were fewer jobs, but even more people. So who was next in line to get blamed? As we got into World War II, the black population in the city had risen to nearly 9% now, and Detroit's economy flipped back into wartime mode. The workforce shifted this time, though, and we see more black workers, more women, and even more competition. Housing construction didn't keep up, and black residents were shoved into these specific neighborhoods through informal segregation. So with the little private space, people spent most of their time outside, especially in public parks. One of the most popular parks in Detroit is Belle Isle, and it's an island off the Detroit River, and it's only accessible by bridge. And on a hot summer day in 1943, over 100,000 people were there. A huge fight broke out between a group of young black and white people. There were white sailors from a nearby naval armory that got involved. The bridge became blocked. People were trapped in or completely shut out. That's when the game of telephone started and rumors spread. People claimed that a black woman and her baby were thrown off the bridge. Others said that a black man had assaulted a white woman. White mobs began attacking black neighborhoods, and the black residents fought back to protect their homes, while the police stood around and did nothing to stop it. In fact, most first-hand accounts say they supported the white mobs. But either way, they were overwhelmed and couldn't stop the situation. Federal troops had to be deployed. By the end of it all, 34 people lost their lives. 25 were black and only 9 were white. Most of the black casualties were at the hands of police or military. After that, segregation and distrust for the police only intensified in the city. The war was coming to an end, so were the jobs. The housing discrimination was just getting worse. And that brings us to our next chapter, the Detroit Riots of 1967.